agendas, that sort of thing.
Sure.
This is David Blank. Currently.
Okay.
Who is customer and shared services. That's human resources.
Threw me off.
Customer service. Brad Houghton, he is
It threw me off. It threw me off.
7 minutes.
overproduction.
Traffic is long.
Don't take a tractor.
Hello, Joe. We don't have CFOs.
Sure.
And then Tim Wise is over here. And it is Folsom Wise. And then there's, we have all of
He was
those.
missing a slot.
Yeah.
And our regular seats. I try not to sit with you guys. But yeah, so it's a lot of dry agenda this time.
Sure.
That's like,
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. As is our custom, we'll start with the prayer and the pledge. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this community that we live in. That we ask that you would continue to bless our community. We ask that you would grant our community leaders, our utility leaders, our commission, our leadership team with your wisdom and guidance as we do the business for our customers and make the best decisions possible for them. We ask that you would watch over our employees as they're out there working every day. We ask that you would continue to watch over those folks affected by Hurricane Florence in South Carolina, North Carolina, and on the East Coast, and comfort them and watch over them as needed. We ask that you would bless us through the nourishment of our bodies and bless us for your service. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any agenda modifications? Okay, we'll jump right into the discussion agenda. And first up is the external audit.
We've got Steve Mudd and Sam Zyra from Ryan Minkoff here to go over the audit.
Good morning, everybody. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody, especially the commission, for giving us the opportunity to perform the audit again this year. We truly appreciate the long-lasting relationship. I'm not sure how many years we've done this audit, but it's been a lot of years. I would also like to give a big thanks to Lynn, Jamie, Bridget, Misty, and the rest of the staff for preparing the audit. It takes a lot of time out of their day to get everything together for us. They are an extremely impressive group of individuals, very knowledgeable in this area. Before I let Stan jump into it, I would like to say that we did issue a qualified or an unqualified opinion, which is considered a clean opinion, and that's what you're after. We spend hundreds of hours going through documents and doing the audit just so we can put that little paragraph in the audit report stating that your financial statements are reasonably stated. So with that, I'm going to let Stan do his 2-hour presentation on it.
All right, yeah.
I'll let Stan briefly go over his report and we'll be done.
I'll try to keep it to an hour. As Steve said, we're very grateful for all the people that we work with here. Lynn, Bridget, Misty, who's not here, others, Jason, Alden, and some others. I'll work with plenty of them. And especially with, medical issues that Bridget had this year, we appreciate Jamie for coming in and really helping out. I mean, it was so beneficial to helping us. So with that said, to keep this in the essence of time short, what I'd like to go over is our professional communication. Everybody's got a letter here. It's addressed to the City Utility Commission. I think it's already up there on the screen here. Every year we're required to provide this information about our responsibilities under GAAP. I'll go over it real quick. Starting in the second paragraph, probably going to be the biggest changes this year. We talk about accounting policies, and a lot of them are described in Note 1, and we also talk about the accounting policies that are changed in the current year. And of course, this year we had 2 changes. As described in Note 1 to the financial statements, we changed accounting policies related to the pension and other post-employment benefit expense by adopting Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement Number 62. Of course, you know that that relates to regulatory accounting instead of course, GASB 68 was implemented several years ago, and we have been expensing those up to this time. I think it's been about 4 or 5 years, I believe. And when we implemented GASB 62, as it related to rate-regulated entities concerning the post-employment benefits and pension expense, now, instead of expensing them, we've gone back, and now they are regulatory assets. So what that means is that asset will be on the books until you adjust your rates to cover those expenses. And that if you look on at the note in note 1, and it talks about that, you can see the difference it made in the current year. It's quite a bit. The other change that we had is described in note 10. Of course, this year they issued GASB statement number 75, and it was implemented to bring on post-employment benefits. And GASB 68 years ago brought on the pension part. This brings on the OPEB part. And of course, since we went ahead and implemented GASB 62 this year, that all was deferred also. So in the balance sheet, you also have a deferred pension obligation as well as a deferred OPEB obligation. And that made a big impact also. You can see the cumulative effects of both of those implementations in the 2 notes in the financial statement. Other than that, we noted no transactions entered into by the entity during the year for which there's a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus, and all significant transactions were recognized in the proper period. Of course, that talks about accrual accounting. Next paragraph at the bottom, we talk about sensitive estimates that affect the entity. We've added a few more. We used to have only a couple. We talk about the estimate of unbilled revenue, the valuation of utility plant, the valuation of the net pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities and their related deferrals, and the fair value of estimates. Of course, as part of the audit, we evaluate the key factors and assumptions used to develop those estimates, and we determined that they are reasonable. Of course, we do state that estimates can change, as you can tell by the pension liability, when they changed some actuarial decisions this year, it made a big difference in that. Second page, we talk about qualitative aspects of accounting. Continued, the financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. Next paragraph, we encounter no difficulties dealing with management. It's always a pleasure to work with the people we have. They're all competent and knowledgeable. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. I'm pleased to say this year there's no misstatements identified during the audit that would require communication to management. What that means is that we develop a threshold for materialism or materiality and a tolerable misstatement, and then below that we have a percentage of that tolerable misstatement. It might be 5%, it might be less, and if we might find something small that maybe need an adjustment, but if it's under that 5%, we don't even propose it because it's not going to change the decision of somebody looking at these financial statements. Now, we aggregate all the misstatements that we find that are above that 5% to see if they were above tolerable misstatement, we would have to ask the client to book them. But Jamie and everybody and Bridget and all them do such a good job, and Lynn, that I'm pleased to say that there's no adjustments identified this year. Next paragraph talks about disagreements with management, which no such disagreements arose during the course of the audit. Next one, we did obtain a representation letter from management dated September 11, 2018, which was the actual exit conference that we conducted, and that is the close of our financial statements where we evaluate subsequent events or any other matters, litigation, commitments, and everything up to that point in time. And you'll notice in the financial statements at the end, usually of both of them, water and the electric, one of the last footnote that we had talks about subsequent events. So anything that transpires between the end of the year, May 31st, up through the date of this our audit report, September 11th, if there's something that would really be significant to the financial statements, we do list that in there. And I think we've listed the power contract that you all signed on the electric side, and then on the water, of course, the bonds that were issued, the rate increase, and I believe that was all. The next paragraph, consultations with other independent accountants. There were no such consultations that we know of with other accountants. Down there, the last paragraph, we generally discuss a variety of matters, including the application of accounting principles and auditing standards with management, which we do, especially when there's implementation of the new GASBs. And each year, part of the retention is the entity's auditors. However, these discussions occurred in the normal course of our professional relationship, and they weren't a condition to our retention, which that's important there. Last page. The first one talks about required supplementary information, which we have to put in the financial statements. They supplement the financial statements, the MD&A, which Jamie prepares, and then the OPEB and the pension schedules that are in the back. We don't audit those. Actually, we know that they're right. We basically do audit procedures on them, but we are not required to audit the RSI and do not express an opinion or provide any assurance on the RSI. Now, on the MD&A, basically, we go through and look at percentages and stuff to make sure they're correct and all that. But we don't go in and audit anything else. But a lot of it talks about operations and future operations. Next paragraph talks about it's non-RSI, which is not required, and that's the schedule of revenue and expenses. Basically, that's put in there just for extra detail and for extra clarity. It breaks down the electric revenue and expenses into each department. And of course, we compare and reconcile the supplementary information to the underlying accounting records. We do reconcile that directly to our trial balance. Last sentence, very important. Information is intended solely for the City's Utility Commission and Management, not intended to be or should not be used by anyone other than those specified parties. That is our required communication. You had a chance to look at the financial statements. I know there's a lot of new stuff in there. I didn't know if anybody had any questions about something that they might want to bring up. JT?
Stan, let me ask you a question. For the assets, could you just give us a little description about each one of these and what's included in that asset clause? And the same thing with the liabilities? All right. Like the utility plant and net, of course, that's the building. I guess that's the fixture itself. And then if you could tell us what the restricted assets are and the current assets, what the definition of those are.
You're talking about the electric.
Yes. Well, I'm assuming, yes, it is electric, yes.
You think they're listed on page 6 there?
Yeah, he's got them right there.
Oh, I'm the MDA. All right, page 6 and 7.
Yes.
Of course, utility plant, it's all your plant, here, buildings, everything, like fixed assets.
Right.
Now, in other financial statements, you may see that listed, not at the top of the page, but later on down there, usually on statements that are maybe in an organization, you list by liquidity. Of course, you're going to see cash first, then you're going to see other assets, and your fixed assets are going to be below. But we start in utility, this is industry practice. We put the utility plant net. Of course, that's net of any debt and everything up there. Restricted assets, Jamie, you can correct me too. Restricted assets, all the assets that are restricted, the different funds that we have, renewal and replacement fund, revenue fund, yeah, just debt service fund, everything's restricted for certain purposes, and those are restricted. Then you can get down into current assets, cash and cash equivalents. Of course, that's basically self-explanatory. Cash equivalents, I think, are, of course, cash is, everybody knows what cash is. Cash equivalents, I believe, are any or investments that they have, probably 90 days, I believe it's 90 days or less, yeah, that are maturity dates of 90 days or less. Might be a CD, might be anything like that. So, and the maturity date is so short that they are considered cash equivalents. You can pull them out without a significant, penalty or anything.
And Stan, it's also broken down the notes on page 17 and 18 of the restricted assets.
Right,
You can see the details.
Right, details of that. Of course, receivables or investments, self-explanatory, that's all the investments that you all hold, that are not restricted. Receivables, self-explanatory, receivable from the wholesale, retail, city of Owensboro, other materials and supplies inventory, of course, that's all your inventory that you have on hand. Prepayments and other, they're just basically immaterial, they're small things that we look at, prepaid insurance, it might be, other, I think there's just small things that just don't fit in those categories. Other non-current assets, unamortized debt expense. Unamortized debt expense, that's when you have bond premiums and discounts and even debt issuance costs there. And that's the part that's unamortized. Now, under GASB, if you're not under regulatory accounting, debt issuance costs have to be expensed. Well, under regulatory accounting, utilities, they can go ahead and defer these, and I believe, let's see, they might be down, yeah, I guess that's it. And they can defer these as a regulatory asset and amortize them. Energy cost to be recorded, of course, that's the ECI that you all develop. And other non-current assets, immaterial. We jump down, deferred outflows of resources, accumulated decrease in fair value of hedging, comes straight from your hedging, or wholesale hedging activities. That's the difference in the fair value. Deferred pension outflows, the $11,749,933, that comes from the actuarial reports that we get from the state. That'll be amortized over so many years, and they give us that. They provide all that information for us.
And how much was that again?
$11,749,933.
That's part of our,
Yeah, this,
But that's not the liability.
yeah, that's not the actual liability, that's the deferred outflow. And what that is it takes into consideration differences in what the actual investments were and what the projected were, different things, you know, because kind of get a perspective on everything. When they do these actuarial calculations that we put into these financial statements, they're a year old. They did those last year as of June 30th, 2017, because there's no way they'd get the numbers in them to have them for the 2018 financial statements. So those are always a year old. And a lot of times when they do those actuarial numbers, they'll project things, you know, they'll project payroll, you know, the increase in payroll. They might project, you know, there's things that have to do with the health benefits, you know, lifespans, different things. And those, a lot of times they'll change those things. And actually this year they did change quite a bit, and it made a big increase in the pension liability. And it's actually in this report back in the back. If you look in the pension schedules, it'll tell you what was changed this current year. It changed, I think, payroll, investment rate, and one other thing, I can't remember what it was. Inflation, yeah. And so that right there is going to change a lot of stuff. And what they do is those changes are put into deferred accounts, and then it's all added together to add up to these deferred outflows, and on the other page, deferred inflows, and then they're amortized over, I believe it's 5 years.
Some of them are 5, some are.
Yeah, some are 5, some are 10
and what was
years.
the total dollar amount of the deferred portion? Do we have that?
The liability,
Yes.
the pension is 35.8 million, and then the post-employment benefit of health insurance is 12.3 on electric.
And you'll see that on the next
It's
page. You'll see
liability.
under other non-current liabilities, you'll
So
see your
the other
net
side is
pension
set up
liability.
as that regulatory asset, so we wouldn't have to book it through the
Mhm.
equity or net position to save us on, they'll be adjusted each other each year going forward.
And if you keep on looking down there, we have the deferred other post-employment benefit outflows. That same thing as the pension outflows, and that refers to those deferred amounts that are in the actuarial report. But under those, that's your actual amounts that you all now have deferred under GASB 62. The deferred pension obligation and the deferred post-employment benefit obligation. So you can see right there, that's a big chunk to defer right there. And, you know, the idea is to recruit those, you know, later on in the future with an increase in rates. Unamortized loss on debt refunding, that's basically when you defease the bonds, you have a gain or loss in there, and then that is amortized over the life of the new bond. Net unrealized loss on investments, that's self-explanatory. If you go to the next page, liabilities. Jamie does a good job on this, on that position, coming up with the actual numbers here. And net investment in capital assets, $7,058,000. Now, that seems like a low number, and it's basically, a lot of these are gonna be net of related debt. So, you know, you might have capital assets that are already depreciated down low, but then you might have debt related to that also. Restricted for capital asset projects, net of related debt, same thing. Restricted for debt service, that's, you know, your sinking funds that you have to put in there for principal and interest. Restricted for other purposes, let's see. Let's see, what is that for?
That's the RNC fund, I believe.
The RNC, that's right,
And
yeah.
maybe the facility charge also.
Mhm. Which, that'll give you your actual net position for the year, just like equity if you were in a conventional, you know, financial statement. Long-term debt under that, self-explanatory. Current maturities of long-term debt, that's self-explanatory. Accrued interest payable, accounts payable, just what they say. Current liabilities, accounts payable that are current, other, and you can see there that the ones up top are payable from restricted assets, and the ones below that are paid just from current assets. Then we get down here, the other non-current liabilities. Now, here's the big ones, you know. This is the net pension liability, the $35 million, which agrees to the actuarial report that was received for this year from the state. Same way with the net OPEB liability. This is the first year that they determined that liability because we implemented GASB 75, which is the same piece as the pension liability that was implemented about 4 or 5 years ago with GASB 68. Other non-current, fairly immaterial. Deferred revenues, that has to do, I think, mainly with the water districts. Then you get down into your deferred inflows of resources. There's the accumulated increase in fair value hedging derivatives. Of course, you saw the decrease in the deferred outflows on the balance sheet. Then the deferred pension inflows, that has to do with the same thing that the deferred outflow, or pension outflows on the other one. That'll be amortized over certain determined lives. And the same way with the deferred other post-employment benefit inflows, that's the same way. That'll be netted with the deferred outflows and then amortized over life. A lot of that is in the financial statements under the pension and OPEB footnote. If you look at it, I'm not sure what page it's on, but it, you know, if you have a night you wanted to read through that, just pick that up. I'll put you to sleep pretty quick. It tells about how everything works, and just gives you an idea of what goes into that. You know, it's quite a bit of.
So we got a current liability for pensions of $48,200,000 and almost $62,000.
Yep.
That's basically our share of what the Kentucky retirement system
Mhm.
said, that there's a shortage, you know, the shortage in the Kentucky retirement system.
Yeah.
And I guess eventually, you know, it'll have to be
Yeah, so
funded
to raise
through,
rates,
probably
you
through
can see
raise
how
or
much
something.
you'd have to raise rates to raise $48 million. So,
Unless the investments go way up, and the market really takes off, you know.
yeah.
Don't put much stock in
This
that,
is
though.
the net of the investment to stay in.
If you look over, if you want to, on the next page, page 9, you can look down there at it's the third to last line, the cumulative effect of the change in the accounting principle. You can see we had to restate the beginning retained earnings for $23.5 million. That was the effect of that changing from GASB 68 to GASB 62 for the pension liability. Now, since they implemented GASB 75 in the current year, y'all implemented GASB 62 in the current year related to, you know, how you record your post-employment benefits. There wasn't a cumulative effect, so that's why you don't have a cumulative effect for that. And you can see in the footnotes, although that other one, when the GASB 75 was implemented, since you didn't have a cumulative effect, you basically just had liabilities and assets go on the books that all net out. Like if you took your deferred inflows and deferred outflows, your net pension or net OPEB obligation and your net OPEB inflows and outflows, it should all net out to the same number or to zero, since it was all implemented in the current year. say those, page 37 is the impact of the implementing GASB 75. Page 13 is the impact of implementing GASB 62. If you go to page 13, you can just see a quick synopsis of that, how the cumulative affected the financial statements this year on page 13. Change in accounting principle down there near the bottom, the cumulative effect of this change resulted in a restatement of beginning net position of $23,544,000 and a corresponding increase to deferred outflows and resources. Effect of the change in accounting principle and change in net position in 2018. If this hadn't been implemented in this current year, then you would have a decrease in your net position of $4,300,000. And then you've also got that in the water also. So you can see what it would have done if you had to implement a GASB 62 related to the pension and OPEB.
And a lot of the reason we did that is because that liability is gonna be paid out years in the future. I mean,
Correct.
I mean, whenever the legislature decides to adjust or pass the laws to how they're gonna recover that. And we'll be, the only way we're gonna be able to pay that is to collect that from our customers. So then when we collect that from our customers, we will record the expense at that time. So that was the whole point in deferring this, is that it's gonna be collected, it's gonna be paid in the future, so that's when we're gonna have to recover from our customers, and so we're gonna record the expense and revenue at the same time.
So it's a better matching of revenue and expense, and that's what they want in the financial statements when they want you to report why, or put in the financial notes why you did that, and you gotta have a valid reason, you don't wanna say, so we can increase our profits, it's the better match revenue and expense, because, right now, you're not, your rates aren't set for, funding that liability, but in the future, you will. If you want to turn to page 37, I'll just go over that real quick and we'll be done. This is the impact of GASB 75, of course, just like GASB 68. Several years ago, they implemented the pension portion. And this is accounting for financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pension. Down there in that second to last paragraph under that footnote talks about resulted in an increase of deferred outflows of $12,934,000 and a corresponding increase in deferred inflows of $643,000 and other non-current liabilities of $12,291. So you can see that assets and liabilities just netted out because we're deferring the expense to later years. So it didn't have any type of cumulative effect on your net position. Right below that, it's just a footnote we put in. Talks about other recently issued accounting standards expected to impact the financial statements, and that's the one talking about certain asset retirement obligations. Which actually we're talking about, it's actually works out well because it's only effective for fiscal years beginning after June 15, 2018. So since OMU is a May 31st year in, they've got 2 more years to implement that, which is kind of nice. Where most people are June 30th will have to implement it next year. Any other questions?
I was just gonna say, Ronnie Hancock does an excellent job. They start in May, and they don't be out to the end of August, so they wear us out quite a bit. But we do, even though they've done our audit for several years, we do bid that out, that service out every 5 years. So their contract ends 2020, so the low bid usually gets the contract. And lucky that. The best bid, but it's, we've been going for the lowest bid.
I'm sure you evaluate experience.
You have been lowest, though. Love it.
Well, one FYI, on that pension liability, that debt is also being amortized over a 30-year, and that's calculating those actuarial assumptions to figure the rate that we pay each year. So it is being amortized over 30 years.
But at some point, you're gonna have to raise the money.
Well, presently, Well, the rates are set to go up 12% a year for the next 3 years. At that point in time, we should reach the level, and they should not, the rates should not continue to go up. If anything, the rates could level or drop off as we reach the new current, because just like last year, the reason inflows jumped is because the pension fund earnings on the assets exceeded the actual assumptions. All the CERS participants raises to their employees exceeded the actual assumption, and the inflation rate exceeded the actual assumption. So all three of the major actual assumptions were exceeded. Obviously, any kind of major downturn in the economy or anything could affect those things, but you would think you would see a leveling of those.
Yeah, but it's also gonna depend on how many people are in there and how many of them are still living. So it's gonna have some of those potential things that can cause.
Under the new assumptions for the CERS is very conservative, and we have exceeded. The KRS is a whole different subject, but in the CERS pension funds, the cities and the counties and the other participants like OMU have exceeded those expectations. And that's what the inflation is when the number of employees expands faster than those assumptions, because that's part of the assumptions. So as long as the city, counties, and OMU and people are growing, things are statewide, things should improve. Yeah, that's correct. I term into 2021. As a pension. Second. All those in favor say aye.
It's that time of year. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Good job.
CJ.
Is this time of year when we review our healthcare plan and structure. And we've got, and shortly we'll have Phil and Holland on the line.
Michael.
If you have any questions for them, Dana is going to lead us through that recommendation. So, Dana?
Good afternoon. I'm going to briefly go through the recommendation memo that you all already had. As you know, we're a self-funded plan since the late 80s. Each year we go through to evaluate any potential costs or risk or changes to the plans that we might have. In the recommendation memo, you'll see our demographic history, so the covered lives ranges in right below 800 to right below 700 this year. The reason for the decrease is like turnover year to year, decrease in people going to opt out of our plan and going to other plans, lower headcount numbers than previous years, so just a small change in that. The plan cost summary chart there will just show you a breakdown of costs for medical costs, prescription costs, and then where our employee premiums lag in that as well. We've seen a slow increase in our cost per individual from year to year. This year we've seen a pretty high trend, but that only goes through June, so we're not sure how it's going to end up or where it's going to be at the end of 2018. There was a 2017 study done, U.S. benchmarking report, that shows just under $10,000 per individual on an annual average cost. We are well below that by 36%. Ours hovers around the $6,000 range. So we have three plans that we offer employees. We have a basic plan, a premium plan, and then 2 years ago we introduced the health savings account plan, the high deductible plans. The basic plan, the recommendation is to have no changes to that basic plan. It is zero premiums to the employee, does not cover prescription costs in that. The deductibles, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, depending on what tier you choose. Premium plan. It is recommended to have an increase in the deductible area, but not an increase in the employee premium section. The increase recommendation is very small, anywhere between $50 to $150, depending on what tier you're on. This helps us maintain our grandfather status under the Affordable Care Act. So just very small changes, which then also changes your maximum medical out-of-pocket. Health savings account, no changes on the employee premium side as well. There is a recommendation to increase the OMU contribution that we make to the health savings account from $500 to $1,000 under the employee tier plan, and from $1,000 to $2,000 under the employee plus one of the family plan.
Can you explain that grandfather status under the Affordable Care Act?
So, 2010, Affordable Care Act implemented. You maintain your status of your plans that you offered. And DJ, you can jump in here too, please.
Okay.
To let everybody know who's on the phone. To let everybody know who's on the phone, it's DJ Story. He's with Pill and Holland. He is our benefits advisor.
So in 2010, if you maintain your, I'm going to give a high level here, if you maintain your plans the way they are, you remain the grandfather status. If you go outside of the Affordable Care Act, or outside of your plans, you fall under the Affordable Care Act. And some of those things that you will then have to implement, we do some of those already. We offer the preventive services. We offer biometric screenings. Some of the other things we don't do. The basic plan doesn't cover prescription. We would have to cover prescription underneath that plan. At that point, we have to evaluate whether you can keep that plan. It doesn't make any sense. We don't cover pediatric oral vision care. We'd have to cover that as well. There's also some healthy lifestyle things that are covered currently that we do, but some that we do not do. Some deductibles are not deductibles, but cost expenditures to acupuncture we'd have to cover. So there's a whole lot of things that we'd have to start covering that we don't cover. DJ, you want to add anything?
It is on, sorry, I was just going to say, it's on a per plan basis. So like on the premium plan, you could maintain grandfather status on the basic plan. On the premium plan, if you gave up grandfather status on the premium plan, you'd have to do things like, we'd have to change up the structure of the plan. Because right now the deductible is separate from the out-of-pocket, and the drug deductible is different. Those have to be kind of a commingled into one straight out-of-pocket. Now I think it's just a function of how you want to present that, and it's a communication piece to the employees. But you would have to make those changes to make sure that it was in coordinates with the ACA.
So what's the consequences of not being grandfathered?
Having to offer some of those services and change around your plans and decide if you want to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically.
Yeah, so what's the consequences of that?
You mean the dollar amounts? I don't have the dollar amounts on me on those, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me ask you this question, like the premium plan, how many employees do we have that adopt that?
Currently this year is around 150.
Out of how many?
215.
Okay, and then are the other ones, or do we have some of those in the HSA plan?
Yes, we do. We currently have approximately 35 people in 2018 that have elected that plan.
Yeah.
You have 10% in the basic, 68% in the premium. And then you mentioned HSA and the other ones have opted out.
So by us raising the deductible from, the HSA to from 500 to 1,000, or 1,000 to 2,000, what's the total amount of money we're going to spend on doing that?
We could be looking at, it was an additional 45?
31,500.
31,000.
31,500.
Okay, so.
Now, to understand a little bit why we're doing that is we brought that plan in, and over a 3 to 5 year period, we're trying to get people onto the HSA because that's a consumer-driven type of plan. So where you're spending your money, you tend to be a little bit more frugal,
Right.
conservative with your money, so that can in turn benefit the employee and benefit us. And we're below the national average, about 19%, and we're at 15%. So basically, we're saying doing this can drive more people over that plan, and as more people get on it, they also sell to the employee base. So we would like to see over the next few years transitioning more and more people
And
to
those
that.
funds roll over every year, so if you have 1,000 left at the end of the year, it goes over to 3,000 from 2,000 if you had that. Do we have some that have large amounts in those HSA plans?
only had it for 2 years, so the most you could have is
I see.
a couple thousand, $2,000, $3,000.
And there are some federal limits to those accounts.
There are some, yeah.
That's not our money.
There's limits on contributions annually, but there's no limit as far as the build over time.
So moving on to some of the other areas, there's no recommended changes to the medical opt-out incentive. On the dental rates, there is a recommendation of a 2% increase. It is a guarantee through 2020. It's a very small amount. OMU does, pays for the employee-only portion of the dental, so the other portions for, depending on the other tiers that you might choose, very small amount. Group life, and accidental death and dismemberment, no changes to that. Voluntary benefits, we have a 2-year rate guarantee through Sun Life for accident insurance, voluntary life, short-term, long-term, through December of 19. One other voluntary benefit, vision, there is a increase of 4%. This is the first increase in 3 years that we've gotten from our carrier of Anthem. We don't cover any of that for the employee, but it is just, we're basically passing that along to the employee, but it's a very small amount, anywhere from a little over $3 to a little over $8, depending on what tier you choose. That really concludes a very brief summary, highlights of the recommendation memo you have. So if you have any other questions, I can take
Those
those.
that
or
opted
you-
out of insurance completely, the medical insurance, are those people mostly that are insured through their spouse's plan somewhere else or something like that?
Yes.
That would be
They're
my
not just totally bare without insurance?
Correct.
Okay, good. That's what I thought, that's for sure. Okay, thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
I know that the fee that was part of the Affordable Care Act has been waived in 2019.
Yes.
How did that affect us?
Talking about the Cadillac tax?
No, the fee.
Corey fee, I'm trying to figure
And
out.
if they
There was just a
want
straight fee,
$3,000
like $12 a month per employee.
So the Corey fee or the?
$700 July.
I'm trying to figure out
There
what's-
was a transitional relief fee that would end this year. That might be what you're referring to as far as that fee. It's fairly small in the grand scheme of things as far as the cost of the plan.
Yeah, that's the one we did not have for 2018, right, DJ?
Correct.
We finished out through 17. I don't have that dollar amount, though. I can get that.
So what's the overall net difference to OMU for the plan?
That difference in
Last year, this year?
what we're trending towards?
Yeah, just cost, yeah, what's the,
Well, if you take the trend, we're gonna be about 15% this year. And so that's looking at, it's about a $3 million spend, so 15% of that. Extra, but that's only 6 months. So we're hoping that that's just, you had an event. And, it's not something that's reoccurring, but, yeah, we are trending, this is at a blip year so far with the first 6 months. So therefore, we've gotta figure out, if we wanna keep status, we can't wait till next year to pass on some of the costs, so we gotta kinda look at that trend and say, let's pass on what we can and still keep within the framework that we want. So then next year, if that trend 15% does stick, we're gonna have to make some changes on the entire design potentially and/or services that we offer, those types of things, because we can't sustain 15%. But medical inflation, so that everybody understands, it's 6%. I think, DJ, is that about right, 6%?
Yeah, that's what we're averaging. I think the underwriters and the carriers are trying to look at a leverage trend that's probably more than like 14 or 15%. But what we're actually seeing in the numbers, what claims are doing on the medical side is around 6 on an annual basis. But they're trying to cushion that because in the RX on the RX side it's even higher. I know it's not shocking to you all with all the commercials you see. Of different drugs that show up there, that the drug spend is up, but we see that trending. The underwriters are looking at a trend that's probably 18 to 20% on drugs. We're not seeing as much of that, but I will say that as far as just what's going on in OMU, we have a couple of very high claimants. It's not not atypical for us to have claimants over the stop loss, but we have a couple that are hitting us pretty hard this year, and that reflects why the claims are up more this year than what they have been in the past up to this point.
So you're saying our increase in cost for the year will be $450,000?
Yes, you're correct. Yep, and a lot of it will be driven, probably close to half of that in prescription. If you look at the trend from, it'll be about, what is that, $800,000 plus? So, yeah.
So, in a basic plan, there's no copay.
That there is no prescription at all, so basically you own your RX. That's like a high deductible plan. We only have, what, 10% of our population on it?
These changes that you recommended, they've been communicated to the employees, so
They will starting today, depending on what you guys
I mean,
vote.
they're not aware of these changes up to this point in time.
I have all employee meetings with my staff at 2:30 today, and he'll have them with his, same thing with the rest of the directors, and this will be a topic. But they understand we cost share. So at the end of the day, we don't think this is a large impact, but we keep mentioning to them ways that they can save money, the ways that the company is trying to manage costs through chronic care, because 19% of our spend, or excuse me, 19% of our covered lives is 52% of our spend. So we're trying to make everybody aware and educate. And it's, I'm not saying our employees do a good job with it, but we still have areas we can improve.
Wellness program.
I would say too, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that as far as deductibles are concerned and like just plan cost shares in general, we ran benchmarking surveys. This will be the second year we've done it with area employers, and I'll just say from a public employer's perspective, the premium plan is still a very rich plan in relation to other public employers that would have, typically have better benefits than your private industry. Those deductibles, I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but those deductibles on private employers average probably around $1,200 to $1,500 on the kind of most popular plans. And what I've seen in the area, just from a regional perspective, Owensboro over to Paducah and everywhere else, that average deductible for what plan people are participating in across all industries is over $2,000. It's over, probably in the $2,600 range where your HSA plan is set up now. Because over time, those deductibles have had to creep up for a lot of employers to offset some of these medical costs. OMU's been able to manage that well, but just doing those small adjustments from time to time can help, to where you can sustain that long term.
Wellness, you said something about wellness?
Have you been pleased with the wellness portion that you instituted a few years ago? Is that growing? Is it stable? The number of people participating in that?
I think it's pretty stable right now, and I think that we probably have put in the appropriate incentives for them. And DJ can also comment on this too, but you have to go through more of a 3 to 5 year process to start realizing some of your benefits from it.
A little early to know for sure.
Especially in that chronic disease management program, because you need to have them in front of those nurse practitioners for a longer period of time to start to really measure those results.
So do we have a figure what the deductibles were last year, and is that the playoff on the 500 to 1,000 and 1,000 to 2,000? Is that trying to take some of that out of there for the additional 10% deductible that's going to be on the plan?
Those are two different plans.
Those are two different plans.
Okay, just that one plan gets 10%.
Yeah, the premium plan, the rich plan he's talking about here, we're raising it 10% on one and 4.2% on another.
Right.
For the deductibles piece. On the HSA, it's employer contribution, trying to look at getting people to transition to that type of plan.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So one has to go up and the other has to go down, or however you want to look at that, to drive people over to it.
Right.
So the summary is, we made really modest increases in the deductible and the maximum out of pocket on our premium plan, which is where most of our employees are. I think they're reasonable. Our costs do appear to be trending up, so we're trying to stay with that. We'll see if this trend continues, but our costs are really pretty well managed at this point. And then we're also trying to encourage employees. If you look, I think we have a calculation that encouraging employees going to HSA, our cost per covered life for HSA employees is about a little less than half of what it is for someone in the premium plan. So encourage folks to move to that, make that a little bit more enticing, as well as the wellness, the chronic care. And we've made another change. It's relatively minor, but it could have an impact. We have the telehealth option where an employee, instead of going to the ER for a sore throat or for a kid's sore throat or something like that, or even going to the chronic care, can get online, see a doctor, you wouldn't want to do this for something serious, but see a doctor, get a prescription for, the Z-Pack or whatever they need without having to get that expense, especially if it's an ER visit. And then that doctor will tell them if, hey, you need to go to the ER, I believe that these symptoms are. So that's a good benefit. We have very little usage of that